welcome. My name is Xander Sprague, and it's Epic begins with one step forward. Today, we're actually talking again to Warren Pearson about Epic in Africa. We had such a great time last episode. I asked Warren if he could come back, and we're going to talk more about how epic Africa is. Last week, we talked about being on safari. We ended up talking a lot about the animals, which are indeed the reason people come by and large, and they are awesome. But there is so much more to being on safari than just seeing the big six and all the other animals that you see. So, Warren and I are going to just sort of talk about some of the other stuff that you see. So, Warren, welcome again.
Thank you, Xander. It's good to see you again. I'm enjoying these weekly chats. It's good to catch up with you.
Yeah, well, it's great that we have the time to do this, and I'm always so excited to be able to share information about Africa. As you said last week, I think, unfortunately, lots of people have, misconceptions about, as you called it, the dark continent, and that it's dangerous and stuff. And it's not necessarily true. So let's talk about some of the really positive parts about going to see Africa. One of the things that I should have known, but I didn't, but when I first went on safari with you, was how incredibly epic the night sky is. And in part, I live in California. There's so much light pollution that if I see a couple of stars, I'm like, oh, wow, look at that. When in fact, there are billions of stars out in the universe. So what does the night sky mean to you? Because you obviously have had lots and lots of time out in the bush to stare at it.
Yeah, Zan, it's a good question. I think that the easy answer to that, and I'll probably elaborate a little bit more, but the easy answer is that it makes me feel how insignificant I actually am on this planet. When you're looking up and you start to grasp and you start to understand the enormity of it, and it's just to this day it still blows my mind, how small we are. And when you look up at the night sky, and it's what I love, and especially in the southern hemisphere, you can actually see 3 galaxies with the naked eye. Pick up a good telescope, you're going to see probably 1,000 more. But just 3 with the naked eye, and the one is obviously our Milky Way galaxy that we are part of. Our solar system is part of, and you think in that one solar system. In that one galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy, there are millions, if not billions or trillions, of solar systems. And we are just one of those solar systems. Our 8 planets and, orbiting the sun, it sort of puts things into perspective. And then you sort of look out there and you can see these 2 little hazy, looks like sort of cotton balls that hang over the southern end of the South African continent and in the south direction. And those are the Magellanic Clouds. And those are 2 cluster galaxies that you can see with the naked eye. And you think that's just another galaxy that we can see. It's got its own solar systems. And it starts to sort of, for me, it really just puts everything into perspective. I'm constantly in awe whenever I look up. And I actually had it this weekend where I was with friends of mine. And the Friday night we were out in the wilderness. And we looked up, and he's got a 17-year-old son. And I was just explaining this to him. And you could see in the 17-year-old, who's normally sort of looking at video games and, TikTok and all these other things that go on in their lives. And Okay, you're looking up, and his jaw was almost falling down. And I was just trying to keep it simple because I think you can lose people very quickly. And he was just blown away by just literally what I've spoken to you now. But when you point it out to people and you stand there, preferably I like to lie on the floor because otherwise you get a sore neck. But you just point out these constellations, and you point out these galaxies, and you point out the stars and the planets, and you can see it's not registering, but it is in a way. And I just love that part of it. It makes us feel completely, and it doesn't matter who you are in this world. If you're one of the CEOs of a Fortune 500 company, or if you're part of royalty, or whoever you might think you are and how big and grandeur your life is, this just puts everything into perspective. And that's what I really enjoy about it.
I could honestly, Warren, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I remember on our first one of our first game drives together, those many years ago. We were coming back, and it was April. I got it's fall in the southern hemisphere, so it gets dark, relatively early, 5:30, 6 o'clock at night. And we're coming back, and I remember you stopped and you said, "Look up." And then we spent like a half an hour just trying to pick out things like the Southern Cross, which in the Southern Hemisphere, if you don't know, is supposed to be the brightest constellation. I mean, sailors used it to navigate, and it was hard to really pick it out because there is such a blanket of stars. And I couldn't agree more. I look up at that and I'm like, I am so insignificant compared to this. And then I start to think about some of the light that I'm seeing has traveled millions of light years. And that star that I see twinkling up there might actually not exist anymore, and may not have existed for 1,000 years. I mean, it's just,
I think that's another point that I was waiting for you to raise and to talk about, because whenever you look up, you're looking at history. And it's, if you look at, the stars, if you understand where they are, and the closest star to Earth is a star in the pointers of the Southern Cross, and that's called Alpha Centauri. Mm-hmm. And it's 4.3 light years away. So literally the light that we're seeing originated 4.3 years ago. Now, the one next to it, so there's two stars in the pointers, which is Beta Centauri. That star is 490 light years away.
Yeah.
It looks like it's right next to each other. But you think that light that we're seeing right now was emitted 490 years ago. I mean, when and where in this world can you actually do something like that and see something that came so long ago? So yeah, it is. I mean, it's vast, and it's massive, and it's huge. And I just love, one reason I like sort of switching off and just getting people to look up and enjoy the stars is just to actually slow down and just think about where you are for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, half an hour, and just almost meditate to yourself while looking up at this canvas that's above you.
And I think the other thing that it does, at least for me, sort of talking, you were saying like meditate, is at least for me, when I'm out on a game drive, my excitement level is just always elevated, because I'm so excited. And what are we going to see? And you see something really exciting and possibly scary to you, be it lions fighting or a chase or whatever, right? I mean, there's just, you're like, and so to then stop and look up and recenter yourself, I think makes part of that whole safari experience so much better. And the other thing that I want, and I'm sure you and I are going to talk about this probably longer than people want, but when you go on safari, you have this wonderfully unique experience, which is you get to see the sunrise and the sunset every single day you're on safari, because you're up first thing in the morning and you're out in the afternoon, and those sunrises and sunsets are so spectacular. And my last safari, I have like all these pictures, and I love every single one of them. And I was showing to my friends, he goes, "What is that?" I'm like, "Oh, it's a spectacular sunset." And then, "Oh, here's the sun, here's the sunrise, and here's the sun." How many of those did you get? I'm like, "Oh, every day. They're all unique and special." If you weren't there, they just look like a sunrise and a sunset and stuff. But and you, my friend, have had the pleasure to see hundreds, if not thousands, of them.
Well, I think, for me personally, I have, and I'm lucky that I have seen the sunrises and sunsets. But for me, what's important is, and especially, because I guide a lot of people from all around the world that lead very busy lifestyles, and I often ask people, when was the last time you actually saw a sunrise or a sunset, or took the time just to watch it? And the majority of people will say, no, I'm either running busy trying to get kids to school, or I'm trying to get to work, or vice versa, coming home. So you don't really get the time. And that's another moment for me, is just to actually just, once again, slow down. And, you get beautiful sunsets all around the world. And there is something about Africa. I think there is it might be just the location that you're in, as in sort of the dust and the safari, and there's wildlife around you. But even if there wasn't, and I always say this to people, is when you go home, wherever you are in the world, just take the time to watch the sunset. Just take a breather, grab a drink if you want, and just watch the sunset. And similarly for sunrise is, I know people don't like getting up early, but to me, it's the most peaceful time of the day.
Right.
I try and get up early, and not always that easy sometimes, but you force yourself to get out of bed. And once again, I mean, for me, it's the ritual. You go get a good cup of coffee, and you go and sit, and you just listen to the birds awakening, and you get what's known as the dawn chorus. And it's these birds waking up and tweeting, and if you sit silently, it's actually so noisy while you're watching this spectacular sunrise ahead of you. And if you are in the wilds of Africa, then you might have the added bonus of listening to a lion calling in the distance, or a leopard grunting, or whatever it might be. That just adds that extra romantic side of it to it. But I always tell people, take the time, just slow your life down a bit, and
right. And so I'm going to pull up a photo, which was from actually our last drive, our last game drive when I was with you last year. And here's the sunset, folks. And the camera is, I did a pretty good job of capturing this, but it isn't nearly, it is so spectacular. And this is what you get to see.
I think, for that, and people looking at that will look at a dead tree that's there. It's not a dead tree. It doesn't have leaves on. It's the middle of winter at the time in the Southern Hemisphere when you were there. But, that red glow is the dust that's in the air. And, just to fill people in that are watching this, that, just, if I remember correctly, Xana, literally just before the sunset, we had a crash of rhino. So a group of rhino that literally walked not too far from us. And I remember I took your two girls, and we walked out just by ourselves, and we sort of got into a closer position on foot, and just, watched these two animals walk past, not even knowing we were there, and at the same time the sun was about to set over this escarpment range. So yeah, it's special. It really is special.
Well, I just wanted to bring that in because here we are talking about it and people are like, what's it look like? Well, that is just one example of kind of what you get to see. And it's special every single time. And it's so exciting to be able to see sort of the beginning and the end of the African daylight, and again, there's so much to see when you're on safari that it's hard to really encapsulate all that it is. What are some of the other things that when you take people on safari, Warren, that you like for them to see, experience, whatever? I mean, I know there are many things, but I'm going to sort of let you run with this one.
I think, Xander, it does depend a lot on where we go. Africa's massive and it's so diverse, and it's in every area, every national park, private reserve, wherever you might be, country, you name it, they all offer something very unique to themselves. And my biggest thing when I take people on a safari is I try and get them to once again slow down. And yes, I think most people come for the animals, and I'm not going to put that sort of or brush it aside because it's a massive part of what Africa is.
Oh, well, of course.
But for me, on a safari, and not just a trip to Africa, because on a trip to get onto Africa, I will say, listen, it's the people. Meeting the people along the way, spending time with tribes. There's a whole cultural aspect of it that I think people don't think about when they plan and book a safari. So for me, it's if we're viewing animals, it depends where we are. I always say, so many people sell. This is a term now, which I'm very aware of, and something I don't really like. And there's the term called the Big Five.
Yes.
And I must be honest, it's a term that I despise. And
I'm sorry, I used the Big Six earlier.
Oh, I didn't pick that up. I'm sorry, but even still, if it was Big Six, Big Seven, because now people are calling something the Magnificent Seven, adding 2 more animals onto it. But to me, first of all, there are so many more things to see in Africa than 5 animals.
Oh, absolutely.
So don't be, and people often get so tunnel vision focused on, I've got to find these 5 animals. Otherwise, my safari's been a flop. So first of all, I'll try and explain to people where that term comes from. So where that term originated from, it's actually an old hunting term. So the big safari, big game hunters. And it was the 5 most dangerous animals to hunt on foot. So just going through those animals, there are 2 cats in them and 3 herbivores. So the 2 cats are lion and leopard. Then the others are elephant, African buffalo, and then interestingly enough, rhino, but it's not white and black. There's 2 species of rhino. It's only originally the black rhino, not the white. The white is a very easy animal to get up to. So those are the 5 animals. So everyone says, I don't want to go there because it's not a big 5 reserve. It's like, yeah, but you're going to miss so much else just by thinking, well, hang on, maybe you don't see black rhino, for example, or even white rhino, or whatever it might be.
Is hippo on there?
So this is the thing. So, the big 5, it's why they're big, because hippo aren't there, cheetah aren't there, wild dogs aren't there, zebra aren't there, giraffe aren't there. I can keep going on.
Oh, yeah.
So there's there are a lot more, there are 5 more, there are a lot more, sorry, let me start again. There are a lot more than just 5 animals in Africa. So, I always try and get people really interested in the small things. On our last safari, we went to areas where, pangolin. I mean, most people have never heard of a pangolin before, for example. It looks more like an artichoke. Very like if people say, well, what's a pangolin? I say, well, do you know what an armadillo is?
Right.
And they sort of, yeah, it's amazing how everyone knows what an armadillo is. But
yeah,
Pangolin, really small animal, one of the most trafficked animals, illegally trafficked animals in the world, critically endangered species. You know, you get meerkats where we went to the last time. You get aardvark, you get aardwolf. There's a whole bunch of other animals that are really special to see, and sometimes a lot better to see. You know, I always look at lions, for example, and probably 90% of the time they're going to be sleeping. And I'm sorry,
There's the
but I don't
pangolin.
really. There's a pangolin. Was this from our trip?
It was.
Ah. So yeah,
I
I
just
mean,
wanted people to see it because most people don't even know what it looks like. So
exactly. You know, and when I say it looks like a sort of an artichoke in a way, I think you can understand why. But so there's so many other animals out there that are really spectacular to see and to find, and I think it's actually almost more rewarding when you do find these small animals, and you realize that not many people in the world have actually seen these animals. And then even the animal side of things, you get into certain areas of vegetation biomes, and you get into succulents, and you get into orchids, and there's just so I always try and get people to see a safari as a holistic experience and not just solely focused on the animals, and particularly the big animals. And hence the stars. Look up at the stars and spend time looking up, because that's part of it's a natural experience. It's a people say, what are you? I'm a naturalist guide. I like to talk about nature, and it's not just I don't like talking about animals, but I like to talk about nature. And so yeah, that's what I try and do on safari, and also try and give people different experiences. So you'll know me. I'm the kind of person that if everyone's going left, I'm going to be that one idiot going right. And I call myself that. But let's go and find our own animals. Let's go and explore away from the crowds and away from the people, and just do our own thing. And that's what I really try and get people to experience when we.
absolutely, and one of the things that I love doing with you, although I have to say when I'm actually doing it, sometimes I'm little nervous, but that's the little nervous is probably a good thing. Kind of gets you back to
Always a
is
good thing.
are the bushwalks.
Yeah.
Get out of the Land Rover, get on foot, get to go see. And let me tell you, folks, when you go on safari, you get to learn a lot about scat, which if you don't know what that is, that's animal poop. But it is honestly fascinating because you learn so much about the animals and how they interact. So for example, elephants eat a huge amount of vegetation in a given day, and yet they have really bad digestive systems. So when you look at their scat, you see literally a whole lot of undigested leaves and twigs and stuff like that. And yet, if you were to look at a hyena scat, they are highly efficient in their digestive, and there's hardly any kind of there's like bone and calcium, and but let's just talk about doing, getting out of the Range Rover, not zipping by, slowing down, and taking a walk. It is you're now getting on all of the animals' terms. Go ahead.
No, exactly, Xander. And I couldn't agree with you more. I always sort of, I don't want to push it too hard, depending on the clients that I'm looking after at the time. But for me, I always try and say to people, you haven't experienced Africa until your boots have got the dust of Africa on them.
Absolutely.
And that's where you've walked. And people go, well, is it safe to walk? And yes, it is safe if you listen to the guide. If you there's rules that you got to abide by, and there's behavior that you got to show and not show. But at the end of the day, we are the ultimate predator on this planet. And in Africa, there's not one single animal terrestrial animal that will actually go out of its way to hunt you. There's only one animal that will hunt you, and that's a crocodile. So if you go down to the water's edge, a crocodile will try and hunt you to eat you. But lions, leopards, everything else out here, they won't hunt you for food. They'll try and kill you to eliminate you as a predator if they see there's an opportunity. And the same thing goes for elephant, for rhino, for buffalo, for hippo, you name it. So there are rules that you have to abide by and you have to follow. But at the end of the day, it is the most exhilarating feeling in the world. And I want to bring into the whole aspect of tracking, because a lot of people don't understand what tracking is.
Oh, so fun.
So with tracking is, you go to a safari reserve on a safari, and depending on where you go in Africa, because it does change and differ, you either have just a guide who will drive, guide, spot, track, do everything, or you actually have a specialist that sits on the front of a vehicle typically, and they track. And when I say track, they look for signs typically on the floor in front of the vehicle. They will look down there for the footprints. But it's not just the footprints, it's the smells, it's hearing, it's branches that have been broken. It's all sorts of things. And they track animals, and they track to find animals. And this is an ancient art that it is, I don't like to think it's sad because it's a reality. It's a dying art. And there's a good friend of mine that has actually started a company to try and bring this back to the fore, to train youngsters up to become trackers again, the original way, which is fantastic. But getting on foot and walking, you slow yourself down. Now you're on the animal's sort of turf, and you tend to understand where you also fit in this world. I think you sort of realize, I'm not this big, strong, two-legged biped anymore. I'm just like, I'm looking around every corner, and I'm trying to think.
Not feeling quite as apex as you were in the Range Rover.
Not at all. And but the fact is that you get out and you slow down, and you get to see so many of the smaller things once again that you will miss by zooming around in the vehicle. And there's a time and a place being in the vehicle and driving around. But to me, I always try and get every single person I'm with to spend some time on foot, walking, and if not walking, tracking. And if we can track an animal, track and find an animal, that to me then that's the cherry on the top. Because the whole aspect of tracking an animal is to try and find that animal, view that animal, without that animal knowing you are there.
Yeah.
Now that's the hardest part. And that
absolutely.
If you can do that, it's the most rewarding experience I think anyone will ever have. It's just, you come away feeling like you have just conquered Everest. You get back into the vehicle and your adrenaline is pumping and everything is just going, and your senses are so heightened. It's just a phenomenal experience. And I can't really explain it to someone unless they've actually tried it and they've done it. That's the only way that they will understand what I'm talking about right now.
And I think, Warren, that's true of so many experiences. Again, you and I can explain in wonderful detail, but until you've seen the African night sky, the sunrise, the sunset, done a bushwalk, tracked an animal, you don't know. Now, what I can tell you is, it's not just walking. It's exhausting, because you're trying very hard to walk the right way, not look down, but be looking around you to make sure that you know what your surroundings are. But you're on, usually a game trail of some sort. You're trying not to break too many twigs and trip and pay attention to what's going on. So you're using all of your senses, and you're trying to do it. And we did a walk, not this safari, but the one before, up in Botswana with our guide Leopard. And we're out there, and then there's a breeding herd of elephants, like probably 100 meters away from us. And now we have to do this really big circle around. And there's some kind of, where we're going through some grasslands. And one thing I wanted to talk about, we touched on last week, you were talking about your experience with that leopard. And one of the things that I'm always, and I shouldn't be surprised because I've been there, but is how hard it is to actually see the animals, any of them, predator or prey animals, in the natural environment. They obviously have all adapted so that they don't stick out, like they have a blaze orange hunting vest on, right? So I can assure you, as I'm walking through, we had to do this big thing, and we're going through this on this path, and there's all this kind of semi-tall grass. And I'm like, I know that there are lots of animals that see me. I don't see them, but they see me. And I'm like, what is going to see me? And I'm on the very end because I'm tall like Warren. So I'm at the very end. I'm thinking I could get just taken out. You wouldn't even know. But
we put the weak ones at the back.
yeah, exactly. You put the weak in uncoordinated. I'm just trying to walk and not fall, and I'm like, oh, but I could be looking around. But there is something about walking and knowing that there are lots of animals, big and small, that are all around you. You don't see them, but they certainly see you.
If you think about how human beings walk, we are, as a species of ape, we are the clumsiest, silliest animals, noisiest animals to walk anywhere and everywhere. And I think we've lost that over time. I mean, I've gone, excuse me, I've gone walking and tracking with, the local San Bushmen or the Hadza tribes up in Tanzania, and these people are still proper hunter-gatherers, and the way that they move through the bush, it makes you feel like it makes me feel sometimes like a clumsy elephant, like just bounding along, and it's embarrassing in a way if you think about it. It's and we are very, very noisy walkers. And the other aspect that you pointed out is, I think that the hardest part is when people are walking, and it's something I always try and get people to do. I try and teach them to do this, is where you come from, walking in cities. And go next time you go out, is look at people, and they're either looking at their phone or they're looking at the sidewalk. So their head is down the whole time, and they are looking no further than the glass pane of the window that's on their side, or the person that's sort of 2 meters or something like that in front of them.
Yeah.
So it's a very small space that you're used to walking in. You're walking down, but now get out into nature and walk. Lift your head up and scan around you, because you are missing so much if you don't do that. But also try and look at the pathway ahead of you, and you typically are walking on an animal path or something like that. And even if you're not, just scan the area around you, that you know what to sort of expect. And when you walk, I always say, try and walk quietly, because obviously with a bomb, or breaking of branches and stuff, you're just going to give your position away so quickly. It's not hard. It's not easy. It's really hard. And it's just something that I laugh at the human race when we are out there, in a way, because we are very clumsy people.
Well, and what I always find amazing is there are times where we've just been sitting. We're not driving. We're sitting. We're waiting, and all of a sudden, an eland or something all of a sudden kind of walks out of the bush. An eland is it weighs probably maybe 3.
It's a huge animal. Yeah.
It's a couple 100 pounds of animal, and all of a sudden, it just kind of pops out. And I sit there and go, how does that thing that weighs twice as much as me, and I'm a big person, literally tiptoe through the bush and pop out, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, there's Elon right there.
More like 5-6 times your weight.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, they're like, but complete, and obviously that's that's evolutionary survival and stuff. But I'm still amazed at something this big walks so quietly. And as you said, it's like I might as well be an elephant with cymbals banging them as I'm walking through the bush.
Well, I think that animals have learned and they've evolved to know how to survive out there, and they know that if they make a noise, they're just giving their position away.
Right.
So their main sense, and I always say this is the way we find animals. Our main sense to actually try and find animals, interestingly enough, is not our eyes. It's actually our ears.
Yeah.
And that's what all these antelopes, so the prey species, I mean, they got massive, massive ears. And they use those ears because they want to hear if there's a predator approaching. They need to know. So if they are walking around and crashing over things, and they're just going to give their position away at the end of the day. So they've learned that they've had to be quiet. They have to walk quietly, and there's specific ways that antelope walk to limit the amount of noise. Even on a fully leaf-covered ground that's going to crackle and stuff, they can still walk through there very quietly.
Yeah.
So much so, even with elephants, if you think about elephants, I mean, being such a massive animal, largest land mammal, an elephant will walk past you. And I promise you now, if you close your eyes a lot of the time, you won't even hear it walk past you. That's how silent and quiet it is on the floor. And the only reason is because, once again, an elephant is ultimately a prey species. It's not a predator, it's a herbivore. And there are parts of Africa, and particularly northern Botswana, where prides of lions hunt elephants. So an elephant is a prey species. So it also has to be quiet. And it's just on their foot. So basically, you see an elephant's foot like that, but their toe structure comes down. They walk on their toes. And this section at the back here is a soft, spongy, cartilaginous tissue, which almost acts as a shock absorber. So when they put their foot down, it almost absorbs all that sound as well as their weight.
Right.
And it's amazing to watch such a large animal like that be so quiet in the bush.
Absolutely. And of course, here we are talking about animals again. Animals are really important and stuff. But one animal that I wanted to just quickly have a conversation about, because I like to myth bust a little here, which is from watching Animal Planet Discovery Channel way back when, Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom and stuff. You see documentaries on lions and leopards and stuff, and we see them taking down game and stuff like that. And one of the things I was surprised to hear is that lions and leopards and even cheetah are not the most efficient hunters in Africa. It is actually the African painted dog, also known as a wild dog. And so, correct me if I'm wrong, Warren, but like lions have like somewhere about a 40% success rate when they go out.
Exactly. So yeah, lions have about a 40% success rate. They are actually living in a pride. They are actually pretty useless hunters for the most part. And it's there's been a lot of theories put out to their why and all that necessary things, but they're not. I think probably it's probably about 40% that they have a successful hunt. Cheetah slightly higher than that. So cheetah, you're looking at around. So let me go back one step and go. Leopard will probably be about a 60-70%.
Right.
Cheetah about an 80% success rate, and then wild dogs about a 90% success rate.
Right. And obviously for leopards and cheetahs, that success rate is slightly higher because they tend to be hunting solo.
Well, it's the different ways in the way that these predators or cats hunt, and lions being the only sociable cat, The females will typically do most of the hunting, but also a myth is that the males won't hunt. The males do hunt, and the males have to hunt when they're on their own. And often if it's a big animal like a buffalo or an elephant or something like that, the males will get involved. They have that weight advantage to try and help. So it's all about coordinating the movements between the pride members. Leopard and cheetah being solitary animals. Leopard's the quintessential cat for me. It is it's the queen of camouflage or the king of camouflage. You'll walk right past a leopard, you won't even know it's there.
That's amazing.
And very typically, a leopard is a stalk and a pounce predator. It has to get within a few feet of whatever it's hunting, and it has an explosive, immediate burst of energy to try and catch whatever it's hunting.
Right.
Cheetah, on the other hand, are the world's fastest land mammal, and they rely on speed. So they don't sort of stalk and pounce. They will have a look at an animal and then literally start walking quicker, and then sort of goes into a bit of a trot. And the next minute, it's almost like they just switch that nitrous gas on and they put the turbo boost and they go. And it is incredible. I mean, you will not believe the speed of what a cheetah can go at when you see it in real life. And it almost irritates me a little bit when you watch these nature documentaries, because they always slow the cheetah down. They always put this into the slow-mo. And I'm like, just do it at normal speed so people can really see what this animal's getting up to. But they have the speed advantage, but now they do have a weakness. So cheetah can only withstand that speed for a very short period of time.
Right.
And a lot of people will say it's because they're not fit, that they can't go for long distance. It's actually that they got to control their body temperature. Now, if you can imagine running at that speed, and I'm talking you're in miles, so I'm talking kilometers.
About 50, 60 miles an hour is about where they're coming in.
And at that speed, the body temperature in a cheetah is spiking.
Oh gosh, yes.
And if they continue for too long, they can actually kill themselves. That their body temperature rises too much, and they'll actually eventually just.
And the only way they have to regulate is through their panting.
Exactly. Big, massive nostrils, small canines to help them breathing, but they can only withstand that speed for a short period of time. So, that speed does help.
Right.
Onto wild dog, or the African painted wolf. Now, I don't like the term wild dog. It's another term, personally speaking, I don't like, because people look at me and go, well, why do I want to go see a feral dog, being a wild dog?
Right.
But it's the second most endangered carnivore in Africa after the Ethiopian wolf. And for me, it's an African painted wolf. It's the scientific name. That's what it basically means, is painted wolf.
Yeah.
And watching this animal work together as a pack, because it's a dog, it's a pack. It literally, it's amazing how these dogs work with each other. But I think the most astounding thing for most people, and it was for me the very first time I saw this, was the speed that these dogs can get up to. They come just short under a cheetah's speed, but they do have an advantage. They have stamina.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And these dogs will literally, and often will actually outpace their animal. They'll run their prey into the ground. The prey can't run anymore, so they actually just literally collapse out of pure exhaustion.
Yeah.
So, excuse me. And they are the most efficient hunters in Africa. And unfortunately, this has been their downfall. It's as I said, it's the second most endangered carnivore in Africa. Their numbers are really, really low. And it's a real special animal to actually see on a safari. But because they were so efficient at hunting, they would hunt, and because they're in packs, they'd have to eat a lot, and they eat very quickly. And the way that these animals hunt as well has been their demise, because they won't go like a lion or a leopard or a cheetah that will go for the jugular or go for the spinal cord and try and snap it, and it's a quick kill. These animals, and excuse sort of the...
it's going to get graphic, folks.
Graphic. They literally will rip the animal apart alive.
Yeah.
That's how they go after their prey. And for us being humans, we'll always say, "Oh, that's inhumane," and it's like, well, but that's not a human. So how can you call it inhumane? Um, it's the way that they survive, and it's the way that they have survived successfully for a very long time. But yeah, for us witnessing this, and it is probably one of the hardest hunts and kills to witness, is wild dog, because they will rip that animal alive, apart alive.
Yeah,
The sounds obviously are not great, but within minutes that animal is devoured, gone.
absolutely. Yeah, I haven't seen a kill, but I have seen after the wild dogs, and I'm talking like honestly 10 or 15 minutes after a pack of wild dogs took down a kudu, which again, a
Animal.
huge animal, and that thing was nothing but but bones, picked clean. I mean, and it is amazing to just see them running. And Warren, you obviously are right, but to just their endurance, they are literally the marathon runners of Africa. They can run for so long at sustained speed, and I do love when we get the chance to see them. Um,
It's always exciting because they're an animal that they're always going to be doing something. It's something like they're quite unpredictable. I always refer to them as this little Jack Russell that's always bounding around and sort of jumping up and down. And it's just, if you spend time, and I think we spoke about this the last time we spoke, was that what you need in on a safari is patience. And with wild dogs, if they're lying and resting, just be patient, because when they get up and they go, it's your world will be changed, because first of all, things happen so fast,
Oh my
and
God.
you often will lose them in thick bush because you just can't keep up with them in a vehicle. That's how quickly they move, and particularly when they're hunting. So, for me, a wild dog or an African painted wolf, it's an animal that I wish people would come out to Africa and say, "Hey, I want to see that animal." And this is one thing I try and do with everyone that I speak to, is try and educate people on these really spectacular animals out here that haven't been given the time that lions or leopards or elephants or these other animals have been given. And as I said to you, I mean, it's quite interesting. I was watching a TV show the other day with my kids, and it was a nature show. It was actually shown live, and it was a friend of mine that was actually talking about the small things, and he was explaining about an African wild cat, how it had hunted and caught a meerkat. And there was no African wildcat, there was no meerkat, there was just the skull of the meerkat. But he was talking about he was explaining this whole thing out, the story about how this wildcat waited and stalked it and caught this meerkat. And then they switched over to another vehicle in another part of South Africa at the time, of sleeping lions. And both my kids looked at me and said, "Dad, I want to go back to Dylan, who's looking at this meerkat."
Yeah.
And there was no animal there, but they were so intrigued with the small things. And then they went to sleeping lions. And I mean, I don't want to give lions sort of a second glance, but for the most part, most people will see lions that are sleeping. And to me, that's not really exciting.
No, look, it's not. I've spent a lot of time watching lions sleep, and like I said last week, watching big cats sleep is exciting for the first 5 minutes, but then it's watching a cat sleep. I don't have to travel to Africa. I could go to someone who has a cat and watch their cat sleep, because it's
You have to come to Africa. It doesn't matter.
well, no, you do, but you get what I mean, which is like you do. You end up seeing lions, and the majority of the time they're sleeping.
Yeah.
And and I I feel you. I mean, one of the great things, Warren, that I've learned from you is the education that you give your clients about um, the African painted wolf, the um, horrendous slaughter of the rhinos, and you really have touched my daughters about the plight of the rhinos, and my older daughter Addie raised money for Rhinos Without Borders and Save the Rhinos, and um, we may have to have a whole hour just talking about that whole kind of thing, because we probably need to wrap up, but I just, that may be another conversation. I think it's a really, really important conversation, because it is absolutely fantastic to go and see all of these animals, see the plants, see the birds, see the small things, learn about all the scatology, and take walks, and all of that. But there's also the more people who understand the pressures that we humans are putting on so many of the animals is it's important. More people who know, the more action that's going to happen, and maybe we can start to turn some of this around, or whatnot. So I know you obviously feel have many feelings and feel strongly about that.
Absolutely. I always try and say, and I have a lot of questions that come my way with regards to, excuse me, people overseas that they hear the plight of these animals, and excuse me, they hear the plight of these animals, and they want to help. They often ask me, what charity I want to help. Is there a charity that you recommend? And I want to contribute some money or whatever it might be. And I try and tell them, and I have to be careful how I say this, because there are so many charities in Africa and around the world that are trying to support and help wildlife, not just in Africa, but all over. And they do a very good job. There are a lot of them that do a good job. But if you, excuse me, if you really want to make an impact, then save your dollars and come on a safari. Because when you come on a safari, you are actually contributing physically to those areas that you are going to. And spend time with the communities, because it's the relationship that the national parks, the private conservancies, no matter who it is, where we are, that they have with the surrounding communities of people. The people want to see foreigners coming here. Right? These people from around the world, they live in here or there, wherever, they coming here to my backyard to look at these animals. So, wow, maybe we should actually do more to protect them and to conserve them. And, I always compare it to a villager seeing a tourist come, and his wife has made beads or whatever it might be, or trinkets or whatever, and you can buy from the villagers, or this villager just gets handed a check for a certain amount of money and says, oh, these people from around the world have contributed to this charity, and this charity wants to build up whatever. They don't see the people. They don't see that physical human being in front of them that wants to help you.
Absolutely, and I fully want to support. Go to Africa, because not only does your being there directly, and you can see how it directly benefits the local communities. But I know for me, supporting Rhino Conservancy means a lot more, because I've been there and I've seen it. I know what it looks like. It's again, it goes back to, once you've experienced it, you feel a lot more connected to that. It's true of any charitable cause, anything that you want to support. If you've experienced what you're supporting, it has a lot more meaning, and you get a better idea of again, lots of great charities, not disparaging, but like anything, there are some that do better jobs than others, and you'll have an understanding of what needs to happen and look at different charities and say, that one's doing a really good job. I like how they're doing it. So anyway, that will be another conversation, Warren. I hope you come back, because it is for me such a important part of what makes it epic. I mean, the thought of our children's children not being able to see like a rhino or an African painted wolf, it makes me sad to think, oh, hey, here's a picture of this.
Yeah.
Not that there that is. So anyway.
Xander, you know me. I think if we can keep talking, and I'm happy to talk about Africa, and I'm happy to, if people have questions out there that have about Africa and about traveling or anything like that, I'm more than happy to answer them. It's just I want people to be educated about it, and instead of just hearing a story through some news source or someone said this or something like that, is I'm here, I'm on the ground, I'm African at heart, and I'm African born and bred, so it's just if people are educated, I think they understand things a lot better, and I'm happy to come back and chat.
Absolutely. And I'll have in the description, I'll have links for Warren's website and how to get a hold of him. And Warren, I want to thank you. Amazing how quickly the time goes by when you and I talk about Epic in Africa. I looked at the clock, I'm like, oh my gosh, we did it.
I was looking at it as well and saying, whoa, where's the time gone? But no, Xander, thank you very much. I really appreciate it, and I love talking to you. And thank you.
Great. Well, my name is Xander Sprague. Remember that Epic begins with one step forward, and I'll talk to you again soon, folks.